to thank Sandy Cahill for suggesting this program, and I'm so pleased to present her grandson, Renato Tonelli, who is the beverage training director of Dante in Greenwich Village, New York City. Was also named the 2023 Bartender of the Year by the U.S. Bartenders Guild, which is an award presented annually. He's very well known for his sustainable philosophy when it comes to mixology, and we're so grateful that he's here. Thank you so much, Renato, for doing this program. And with that, I kick it over to you.
All right, great. Thank you for having me, and thank you for reaching out. And thank you, Grandma. Sandy Cahill is my grandma. She's the one that got me this gig to do a little presentation for you all. So right now I'm sitting down because of the layout of my house. But every now and then I'll tilt the camera a little bit so that you can see what I'm working on the cutting board. And I'm going to show you how to make one sustainable ingredient that was one of the first ingredients I came up with. And it really blew up a lot on the web during COVID. And I'll show you how to use that ingredient also in certain cocktails. So a little bit about me. I've been bartending since I was 19 years old. I was bartending in university, and I have been doing it now for about 15 years. And I started in Rome initially, and then I moved all over the world, traveled in Australia. I currently work at Dante, just like Elizabeth was saying, which is known as it was awarded the world's best bar in 2019 and 2020. And I'm the beverage training director there. I also won a competition called the World Class Competition, which is one of the most difficult competitions in bartending. It's held all around the world. About 54 countries competed the year I competed. So I was representing the US up against every individual that was representing their own country, testing you on all different kinds of challenges that they create. And I also have my own blog, which is called Sustainable Bartender. And Sustainable Bartender it's my passion project, and it's a platform mostly for bartenders on how to reuse leftovers primarily. So how to use things that usually get thrown out behind the bar or even behind the kitchen, and how to extract the most out of them. So how to extract the flavor out of them. So what we see a lot in kitchens and bars is the problem of waste, even at homes, but especially in the hospitality industry. So what I found though was that some items that are left over in the kitchen can be used in the bar. So for example, maybe a kitchen doesn't use they use watermelon, right? But they leave over the rinds, which they don't really know what to do with them, but it can be used in the bar in a liquid form. So I've been experimenting for many years, and even in the competition that I did, a lot of my ingredients were sustainable, so they were using leftovers like carrot tops, cherry stems, peach pits, tomato stems, banana peels, watermelon rinds, all kinds of leftovers. And the great thing about using these leftovers is not just that you're doing some good for the environment and the planet, using everything to the last bare seed or skin, but you're also extracting flavors that are not normally used behind a bar, behind a kitchen. So you're giving something innovative and new that most people probably have never tasted before. And that kind of makes your cocktails or your food shine. Sustainability behind the bar is a relatively new concept. It's gaining a lot of traction. Uh, but if you think about it, sustainability already existed in kitchens a long time ago, right? So the example I like to give to my bartenders that are kind of weary about sustainability behind the bar is as I tell them, think of a chef, right? A chef, they will buy, for example, a whole chicken, a whole piece of produce, and then the chef will dissect the produce maybe and use maybe the thighs and the leg for one kind of preparation, the breast for another kind of preparation, and then they'll take the carcass, right, which is basically the waste, but they'll use that to make soup, right? They'll use that to make stock, right? So the chef is using every single part of a food item and making sure that nothing goes to waste, making sure that everything gets used. And in the bar culture, we don't really do that, but we're starting to. So when I see, for example, a lemon, I know that a lemon has a lot of different components to it, right? It's not just the juice that's inside the lemon. It has the skin, and the skin has a lot of oils and aroma and flavor. And then underneath the skin, it has what we call the pith, right? The white part, which is usually the hardest part to use, but it's bitter, right? So it could be used as a bittering agent. And then you have the juice once you squeeze it, which is what's normally used in cocktails, right? The lemon juice. And then after that, you have the pulp, right? And what can the pulp be used for? The pulp can be used for maybe marmalades or jams, or you can use it for lemon curd. And then you even have the seeds. And the seeds, I mean, yes, you can replant seeds, or I mean, it's such a little tiny component you can even throw out, but you can even use those seeds for other things like infusions or whatnot. So you can let it sit in alcohol or in vinegar and extract all the flavor from the seed, the bitter flavor from the seed, and use that as well. So this is the concept of what bartenders need to be doing a little bit more, and even home bartenders is making sure that they know uh, how to use their ingredients to the fullest capabilities. So I like to teach my bartenders about the 5 techniques of sustainability. And these are techniques that bartenders have in their portfolio. It's techniques that maybe the term mixology is used a lot to them, that they're very almost scientifical, but a lot of these techniques you can use at home and they're very easy. So the 5 pillars of sustainable techniques behind the bar are um, oleo, oleosaccharides. I'll go into what that means. Pickling and shrubs, infusions, dehydration, and fermenting. Okay. So going through these 5 techniques, what these 5 techniques have in common is that they all transform an ingredient from one thing to another thing. And typically, what all these 5 techniques do is that they preserve, right? So an oleosaccharum is basically preservation through sugar. So think of it like a marmalade. So if you're going to make apricot jam, or I don't know, raspberry jam, right? What you would do in the past is, and even today, but you would normally have the harvest. Now we have the luxury of getting raspberries all year round, but normally you would have a harvest, right? A raspberry harvest, and then you'd preserve it with sugar and make jam. And that's how you would extend the shelf life of a piece of produce. So oleosaccharides, right? Preservation through sugar. Pickling, so the preservation through acid. In this case, maybe vinegar, right? So think of pickles, right? You're taking a cucumber and then you're making a brine with the vinegar, and the acid of that vinegar is making sure that no microorganisms kill or infect and make that cucumber rot. So you're preserving something through pickling and through acid. And that's what we do a lot in bartending. They're called shrubs. It's when we make a syrup and add a little bit of vinegar to it. So now it's got like a sweet and sour tanginess to it, but now it's got shelf life even longer. The third technique was called infusions. And infusions are very easy. You can have all different kinds of infusions. An infusion can be like brewing tea, right? That's an infusion. You're taking tea leaves and hot water, and you're extracting the flavor. But what I really mean by this third technique is infusion with alcohol, typically. So infusing with a vodka. So let's say you take strawberries and vodka, and now you've extracted all the flavor of those strawberries, and now they're in the vodka, right? And also, if you keep the strawberries in there, they're not going to go bad. Kind of like brandied cherries, right? You pick the cherries, you put them in brandy, and now their shelf life is years, if not almost a lifetime, because alcohol doesn't really go bad. That's kind of the creation of where alcohol came from. It was an ingenious creation, creating beer, wine, and then eventually distilling into spirits to prevent something from going bad. Always going back to a harvest, right? So taking maybe barley that would maybe go bad one day, making bread out of it, but also making alcohol, so that you had something to drink. Because back in the day, also water wasn't very potable. So you'd mix a little bit of the alcohol with the water to kill the bacteria. Anyways, I'm going a little bit off there. But fourth technique was dehydration. So dehydration is you usually need a dehydrator. In the summertime, you can also dehydrate something outside, but dehydration is basically the extraction of the water, of the moisture that's inside of something. So if I take the lemon, right, and I slice it and I dehydrate it, I remove the water out of the lemon, and now the lemon um, slices have turned into chips, and now they're not going to go bad because there's no microorganism that can find its way through because there's no water content in it, so it can't make it rot. And then the last technique was called fermenting, and fermenting could be a lot of host of different things, but fermenting usually preserves as well. So these are the five techniques of sustainable bartending, and today we're just going to do one. We're going to do the sugar preservation, or called oleosaccharum. So the oleosaccharum, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of this term. It sounds a little bit strange, but oleo means kind of like oleo, like oils. And it was originally used in the past, especially in colonial America, to extract the flavor from the peels, okay, through sugar. How it works is basically what they would do in the past is that they would peel their citrus, so grapefruit, orange, lemons, limes, and mix them with sugar. And what that would do is that the sugar actually extracts and attracts H2O molecules and moisture. So it would extract the water from the peels, and then once the water and the sugar touched, the sugar would dissolve and turn into syrup. So what you would have is you would have basically a citrus syrup. And they would use that a lot in the past to make punch bowls. The punch bowl is usually a communal cocktail of 15 cocktails worth, but they would peel all their citrus, mix it with sugar, and then the sugar over a couple hours or days would extract all the moisture from the peels, and then it would dissolve and make a syrup. And then that would be their sweetener for the cocktail. And so this kind of idea of oleosaccharum, it really came from but this idea of using it for other things like banana peels. It came from this. So usually when you use the peels and you mix them with sugar, what you get is just a little bit of syrup. But I thought to myself, okay, so if sugar can extract the flavor of a peel, it can also extract the flavor of anything else. And a lot of people, they make jams like this. They mix strawberries and sugar and then let it rest. And without even cooking it, they'll get basically a syrup, which then they can turn into a jam. But I thought, what if we can use this technique on leftover food waste? And the first idea was to use the peel of the banana, right? So because the peel of the banana has a lot of moisture in it. And typically, when you think of peels or fruits and the skins and what the skins would taste like, typically the skins basically taste like the fruit itself. And if you think about also skins of fruit, usually are the most nutritious part of the fruit or vegetable. Potato skins, carrot skins, they have the most nutrients. So it's um, kind of what's the word? Useless if you throw away the skin of a fruit because you have something that's technically food. It's just that our society doesn't see it as food and doesn't recognize it as food. And that's the kind of change that we're trying to bring through the various platforms and whatever. So the first thing you'd want to do, and now I'll show you how to make this oleosaccharum, so this basically banana peel syrup, is by first getting your banana and making sure that you wash it really well. It's the same whenever you make the citrus oleosaccharum. You want to make sure that you wash the skin of the fruit, the outside, and dry it. And you can also buy organic if you're very concerned about pesticides or whatever. But there's also ways around it, like soaking this in baking soda and then drying it afterwards. But a good wash is fine. So this is, I think we can start with the how to make this. The banana peel, right? You simply just open it up. Maybe I'm gonna tilt my screen a little bit so you can see my cutting board that I have. And usually with banana cocktails, banana is actually a very difficult flavor to extract to make in cocktails because the actual fruit it doesn't really have any juice in it. If you put this into a juicer, you wouldn't get any juice, like an apple or like a peach. So that makes it very difficult to mix into cocktails. But what I found is it's actually easier to mix cocktails with the actual fruit itself. And this is, of course, if you're not going the route of buying a banana liqueur already. So I'm going to do the opposite. Rather than throwing the peel out, I'm not going to throw this out. I'm going to eat it later. But typically in a bar setting, what I would do is that I would dehydrate it and make banana chips. And then I'd use those chips as a garnish. But right now we're only doing the sustainability part, which is the peel. So here's the banana peel. And this is a really easy, I chose this technique to show to all of you because it's really the most approachable technique to do at home. It's very easy. It doesn't require any special equipment. And it's something that bars, kitchens, and people at home can do. So what I like to do typically is I like to rip the banana a little bit into 3 or 4 pieces, in this case, in 3. You're going to get a lot of flavor, of course, from the peel itself, but a lot of flavor from this part, the inside of the banana. And when you're cutting the banana, you want to make sure that you're not cutting it like this, okay? The reason being is that, of course, you've seen maybe a lot of cartoons of people tripping on banana skins when they're face down like this, right? That's because this part is, it's very slippery, right? So we want to actually put the dry side of the peel on the cutting board and then cut that way so that we don't cut our fingers and slip. And what I like to do is I like to cut this into long strips. Actually, even before I do that, you can even go as far as using the stem of the peel, right? So the actual, this part. What I like to do that is I like to cut that part into discs. We're going to save it, and then we're going to slice the rest of the banana into thin strips. Now, you don't have to do this process, but it's highly advised that you do this. You can just mix banana peels in their whole form with sugar, and then the process of making that syrup will work still. But when you cut something up and you dice it finely, you're basically creating more surface area. And by creating more surface area, you're giving the sugar more surface to work on. So more points of contact to make contact with the skin. And therefore, you'll make more syrup by cutting it up a little bit more. So I cut into thin strips, and then I'm going to cut. So I cut lengthwise, and now I'm going to cut the other way to make sure that I get like a diced thing. Let me just show you. I'll just chop it up, and then I'll show you what I get. But really, you're not, this is not like julienne style, making cutting carrots. You don't need to be perfect. It just needs to be chopped up, basically. Here we go. So I have all my chopped up skins. I even have my stem here. As you can see, let me show it to you, maybe closer to the camera, right? That's all the banana peel just chopped up, okay? And this is gonna be the base of our syrup. So what I like to do is this recipe is very easy. All you need is literally sugar and banana peel. You can use different kinds of sugar, but white granulated sugar is going to be the best kinds for this particular recipe. Also, because if you use different kinds of sugar, you get different flavors. And this one is more like of a blank slate that'll make the banana come out. Now, you can mix them together without measuring. That's fine. But for consistency reasons, it's better to measure in grams or in weights, so grams or ounces, or even in volume, however you'd like. So what you'll do is, oh, I think my scale broke, but I can use something else. So we'll probably have to eyeball it, actually. Oh, no, it's working. It changed its mind. Okay, so I have my scale. Don't worry about the numbers. All you're going to do is take a jar or any kind of container. It can even be a plastic container. Take the jar, right? Put it on the scale, tare. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the peels and I'm going to measure the sugar. And I'm going to look for an equal 1-to-1 ratio. That's the best ratio that I find to make this syrup, a 1-to-1. You can add more sugar or less. If you add less sugar, you're going to get a thinner syrup. If you add more sugar, you're going to get a thicker syrup. The problem with a thinner syrup is that with a thinner syrup in your cocktails, it's gonna not be as strong in flavor. So you have to add more. If you have a thick syrup that's too thick, the good thing is that you can add less. But the problem is that the sugar might not dissolve really well and it'll take a longer time to do it. So just a 1-to-1 ratio is the perfect quantity. So what I'll do is you'll just put the peels in your jar and measure them. So I'll tell you how much I have. I have about 60 grams, 60 grams of banana peels. And so I'm gonna tear that and I'm gonna put the same exact amount of sugar with the banana peels. It looks like a lot of sugar, but it'll all dissolve and go away. And from this recipe, you'll get plenty of cocktails worth. You'll get, with 60 grams, I would say you get maybe 5 cocktails worth. And that's only from one banana peel, right? So now you have your sugar and your banana peels. And remember, you can do this with anything. You could do this with watermelon rinds. You could do this with mango skins. You can do it with any leftover product. You can also do it with, of course, fruit itself, like fresh strawberries or whatnot. What you want to do is you want to mix the sugar and the banana peel together to make sure that all the sugar is coating every little piece of the banana peel. And if you ever need a review of this recipe, you can go on the website on my website. It's called Sustainable Bartender, easy to remember. And this is one of the first recipes created, so it's very, very easy. So all you do is you mix everything together, make sure that all the stuff from the bottom, all the sugar from the bottom is mixed together. And already, as I'm seeing, right, the sugar is getting clumpier, right? It's getting a little bit wet because it's already extracting the moisture. It's doing its work. It's doing the work of extracting the moisture and the flavor of these peels, right? So I would even, if I were you guys, I would try this at home just to test it out, even if you're not going to use it, just to taste it, and you'll be wowed. You'll be like, wow, that tastes like banana. It's incredible because it's just the skins, right? So what you would do with this now is that you basically have to sit and wait. It's what we call in the industry set it and forget it. And we love that kind of those kinds of ingredients and those recipes because you don't have to be there cooking, you don't have to be there stirring, you don't have to watch over it. You literally just leave this at room temperature and it'll do the work. It'll slowly turn into a syrup. 4, 5, 6 hours. I usually do it before going to bed, and then in the morning time, whoops, you'll have a syrup. So this is basically what I like to call the Martha Stewart method, which is when Martha Stewart, when she used to have the cooking channel, she would put the turkey in the oven and then she would take out a fresh cooked turkey and be like, see, that's the result. So this is what's happened, right? It's the same exact process. This is about the same amount. It's just a bigger jar. But you see, all the liquid has been extracted, right? Um, you'll see even at the end of this presentation that you'll start to see a little bit of liquid form in the one that we just did. But that will be the end result, right? So now all you'll have is basically a syrup. The sugar that extracted the juice of the banana naturally at room temperature, and then it dissolved in its own liquid and created a syrup. What would usually happen is that sometimes you'll have a little bit of sugar in the bottom because sugar dissolves really well when you stir, not just with heat, but with stirring. So in the morning time, if there's some at the bottom, you just have to give it a stir. And if it's still being a little finicky, you just pop it in the microwave for literally 5 minutes, 7 minutes, just to make sure it dissolves, stir, and that's what you get. So I did two kinds of banana peel syrups. I did the same ones, but with one, because I just want to mention this to all of you. I add a little bit of vitamin C. So it's basically ascorbic acid. It's an acid that bartenders buy a lot. It basically prevents oxidation. It prevents the oxidation of things. So for example, if I cut an apple, the apple, as all of you probably know, will start to oxidize. The apple, it's white inside, but then it starts to brown. And when it starts to brown, it starts to change flavor. So what you can do is you can add a little bit of ascorbic acid or even lemon juice, right? Because lemon juice has a lot of vitamin C and it will prevent that browning. I use ascorbic acid because it dissolves really well and it doesn't add a flavor. But you can also use a little bit of lemon juice um, into this. And what will happen is it'll keep the color. So as you can tell, these were both made at the same exact time yesterday. This one was the one that we, for example, just made now, the fresh one. This one instead, I added a little bit of ascorbic acid. So it's preserved the color. Now, a lot of people and mostly bartenders, they usually would think one is better than the other. Maybe this one's better, that one's better, this one's better because it looks more like banana, it's yellow. This one looks ugly, but it has different flavor. But the way that we should be thinking about things is that um, flavors are all different, right? And they could be used in different ways. This one that's oxidized, right? If you think of like a ripe banana versus a yellow banana, right? This is exactly the difference that's going on. The yellow one tastes more like a fresh banana. The brown one that doesn't have the acid tastes more like a ripe banana. And that's great because now you have two banana syrups that have different flavors. You have one that's fresh and one that has more, it tastes more like banana bread, right? Kind of like an apple that oxidizes. If you eat a fresh apple, it's crisp and bright and high in acid. But when you eat an apple that is browning a little bit, I mean, maybe some people don't like it, but it tastes more like apple pie a little bit. It tastes a little bit more like it's like a baked apple. Um, so I like to use these different techniques, the one with a little bit of vitamin C to preserve the color and the one without to use for different kinds of cocktails. Maybe like a stirred down boozy cocktail with whiskey. I like to use the one that has more of the flavor of banana bread. While with a cocktail that's shaken with citrus and it's brighter and lighter and more refreshing, I like to use the banana that doesn't taste overly ripe. It's a little bit more like eating a fresh piece of banana. So now I think we can go to cocktail making. I'll show you guys. Actually, I told Elizabeth I'd show you guys one, but if we have time, I'll do two quickly to show you the differences of using these banana peel syrups. So the first cocktail that I'm going to show is just, and these are going to be approachable cocktails that everyone loves and everyone can do. The first one will be an old fashioned. So I think most of you have heard what an old fashioned is and might is. Um, but an old fashioned is basically a spirit. So it's usually bourbon or whiskey, bourbon or rye. In this case, I'm using rye. And then it has sugar. But instead of sugar, we're going to use the syrup, which is sugar, but it's a flavored sugar, right? So a flavored banana syrup. And then an old fashioned also has bitters, which is usually Angostura bitters. Angostura bitters is a bitter that you can find everywhere, pretty much. Every bar has it, and every home bar should have it because you can make so many cocktails with Angostura bitters. Um, there's different ways of making cocktails, right? There's different styles of cocktails. To understand how to make a cocktail, it's actually very simple. It's all about balance, right? Very similar to food. You know, you don't want to make something overly sweet or overly sour, but it's almost easier in a way with cocktails because there's just like less going on. You don't have to cook, right? Um, uh, to know how to balance, you need to know the flavors that exist on our palate, and it's very simple. There's just five flavors. There's sweet, there's bitter, sour, salty, and umami. There's also another one that's spicy, but people usually talk about the five flavors, the five flavors that we all have on our palate. The most important ones for cocktails are the first three. So not umami and salty, because we don't usually put salt in things. Sometimes we do, but usually no. And umami, which is a Japanese term for kind of rich. We don't really use rich flavors so much in cocktails. But what we do use is we use sweet, bitter, and sour. So sweet would usually be in the form of sugar. So all cocktails have a little bit of sugar in them. just like with baking, you have to have sugar in it. And sugar can mean sugar, maple syrup, molasses, honey. So different, anything that's sweet. Sour is usually in the form of citrus. And that's usually what's used in cocktails. So lemons and limes usually. Once you get into grapefruit, you're getting a little bit sour, sweet, bitter. And when you're an orange, it's sweet, sour. But lemons and limes are sour. And then bitter, and bitter is usually in the form of what we call bitters or tinctures that are used a lot in the bartending world. It's usually an alcoholic product. So this is alcoholic. It's actually very high in alcohol. It's 44%, but you only use in small amounts because what they did is they overly extracted flavors that are very bitter. Roots, herbs, barks from trees, things that are usually not really, you can't really eat them in their whole form, but you can extract the amazing properties and flavors from them. And they were usually used to cure upset stomachs in the past. And now we use them in cocktails because they have so much interesting flavor in them. So when we make an old fashioned, the old fashioned is basically balancing the sweet with the bitter. There's no sour, right? There's no citrus in an old fashioned. We'll get to another cocktail with citrus in it. But what we're using is just basically a spirit, a sweetener, and a bittering agent. And this cocktail is going to be stirred because old fashions are stirred. You usually stir a cocktail that doesn't have anything fresh in it, right? So if you have like a lemon juice or lime juice in a cocktail, you normally shake it. Rather, if you don't have it and you only have ingredients like this, you would stir it. And that's because you want the texture to be nice and silky and velvety. If you were to shake a cocktail, you'd be what we call bruising. You'd be over diluting the drink. You'd be adding too much water. Because when we're making cocktails, the other factor that's in besides the ingredients is the main ingredient, which is actually ice, which people actually tend to forget about. But ice is the most important ingredient. Ice does multiple things, of which one, it gets your cocktail cold, and two, it dilutes your cocktail. It adds water to the drink. And that's really important because um, cocktails are made for softening harsh things. Like rather than drinking whiskey neat, right? Or on the rocks, you soften it with a little bit of flavors and water. So you make it a little bit easier and more palatable to drink. So we're going to stir this drink. And to stir, what you need is usually a mixing glass, but you can honestly use any kind of glass. Just a little brief breakdown, maybe of bar equipment before we make this drink. Um, Bar equipment is it's kind of like being a chef, right? You don't, if you're cooking at home, you don't need all the equipment of a restaurant, right? The chef has a million different knives. They have different kinds of ovens, different kinds of like equipment. But every good chef will even tell you at home, all you need are two knives, right? You need like a big knife and a paring knife, and a cutting board and a bowl, and maybe like a small pot, a medium pot, and a large pot. And that's the same thing with bartending. You don't need a mixing glass. I have one, so I'm going to use one. But all you can use a beer glass or just any kind of wide glass because this is where you're going to mix your cocktail in. You don't need a bar spoon, right? This is a bar spoon. A bar spoon usually is a twisted handle. It makes it easier to stir. You can even use just a regular spoon to make cocktails. One thing that would be helpful is to have a shaker, right? If you're going to make cocktails. But you can also make cocktails, and I've seen people make cocktails, and I've made cocktails with just a jar, mixing all the ingredients in, adding ice, and shaking it in the jar and pouring it out. So you really don't need any high-end equipment. But one thing that's helpful is also a strainer. This is to strain the contents from the mixing glass to the other glass. So to separate the ice, because usually when you're mixing cocktails, once you stir or shake, you don't want to use the same ice in the final product of the drink. You want to separate the two. So that just keeps it clean. And then finally, maybe a fine mesh strainer for shaking, but we'll get into that later. So to make this cocktail, we're going to do the banana peel syrup, and I'm going to use the darker banana peel syrup because the darker banana peel syrup has that banana bread like flavor that's going to go really well with the whiskey. Now, of course, you don't use it like this. I didn't strain it out because I wanted to show you the peels still in there. But what you would normally do is that you would strain all the liquid out, right? You would do this beforehand. So strain all your liquid and then you discard your peels so that you only have the syrup. So that's the syrup. So this cocktail, I just use a little bit of syrup, which is basically a quarter ounce. And then I'm going to do some of the bitters, the Angostura bitters, just a couple dashes too. I also have walnut bitters because I think walnut, whiskey, and banana really work well together. If you think about it, banana and walnut in an oatmeal dish works. So why not use a flavored bitter that will work well with everything else? This is how you make cocktails, right? You can how you make something that's original, like an old fashioned, into something new, right? You have the whiskey, you have your sugar, but ours is flavored with banana. You have the bitters, but we're using a little bit of walnut right now also. So you can make something that's approachable that people understand. Oh, an old fashioned, but it's interesting, it's new. It has different kinds of flavors. And then we're going to use the whiskey. And an old fashioned, it does have quite a bit of booze in it. So it's 2 ounces of whiskey. But of course, I'll show you another cocktail that's a little bit more approachable. Now, the main reason why I pour everything in without the ice first is because I want to have control of what's going on in the glass, right? I want all the liquids to mix together by themselves, and then I'll add the ice later. Because if I were to add the ice first and then add everything, the one first problem is if I use the syrup, if I pour the syrup in, right? It'll catch on the ice and then it might not, it'll stick to the ice and it won't be mixed all properly together. And then the other problem is that if I start pouring things over ice, what's going to happen is that I can't control the dilution well. So I'm not going to be able to control how much water is going into this drink, and I won't be able to control actually how cold it is either. Um, but now we're in control. So what we do is just give it a little stir. And now I'm going to go to the freezer to grab ice. I didn't want to bring it out here because otherwise it would melt. So excuse me 1 second. Here we go. And we have my ice. And I don't have an ice shovel here, but I'm just going to plop it in. I'm going to use the bar spoon to gently let it go in so that doesn't splash and get dirty and all over the place. I really recommend if you're making cocktails, you do it on the countertop next to a garbage can. Very useful tip, just in case you got to throw things away, get rid of stuff. And always have a bar rag or a towel of some sort just to wipe up any messes because you're dealing with liquid. So, if you're making a mess in the kitchen from food, imagine from making cocktails. It's worse. But what I'm going to do also is I'm going to put some ice into my glass. And this is the glass where the cocktail is going to be served in. Of course, you can also, if you have like an ice mold that does big rocks of ice, you can use that. Old fashions go really well with big rocks of ice, but this works well also. I'm going to put that aside for now, and then we just stir, right? So we're stirring the whiskey, the banana syrup, the bitters, right? Because the bitters are going to add interesting flavors, and it's going to balance the sugar that's in here. And we also did a little bit of walnut bitters, which is also bitter, but it's going to give a little bit of flavor. A lot of people don't know how long to stir for. The general rule of thumb is 15 to 20 seconds. But what you should do is just like a chef does, a chef tastes their food before they serve it to everyone else. You could taste. And what you can taste, you can use a straw. I like to use metal straws because this is much more sustainable than using a plastic straw or a paper straw. Because it just won't go, you'll have it forever and it won't go bad. And what you'll do is you can go in, you can plug it with your finger so you catch a little bit of liquid, and then you taste it to see if the dilution's right, if it has enough water, or if I added too much syrup or I added too much bitters, and I can readjust. In this case, it tasted like a little harsh, right? it's got a lot of heat to it because it still has a high alcohol content. So it just needs another little bit of a stir. But the thing with an old fashioned or any stirred drink is you don't want to overstir. You never want to overstir. It's better. It's kind of like adding salt to a food. If you add too much, you can't go backwards, right? It's better to add little by little at a time. So it's better to stir a little bit at a time. You can also taste in a different way by putting your palm out, putting a little drop on your hand, and tasting it. And that's good. You want an old fashioned to be still not harsh. You definitely don't want it to be over diluted because the old fashioned cocktail, it'll evolve in this glass, right? So right now it tastes a certain way, but by your last sip, it's going to taste a little watery and tasty in its own way. That's because it's going to be still melting with the ice here. We just pour it in the glass. I did a tinier old fashioned. You know, if you go to a bar, they're pouring you 2.5 ounces of bourbon, 3 ounces of bourbon. I didn't, want to, add that crazy amount. Just give it a quiet little stir. You want to give a little stir in the glass because maybe the ice is a little bit all jambly and funky. And the most important thing is that when you're serving a cocktail with ice in it, you got to make sure that it's packed with ice. And there's a misconception here at a lot of places is that people don't want a lot of ice in their drinks, but you should have a lot of ice in your drinks. One, because you want your cocktail cold. So you want a lot of ice in there. And two, if you have a lot of ice in your drink, it's not going to melt as fast. Rather, if you have very little ice in your drink, it's going to melt faster and your drink is going to be warm and it's going to taste watery. And the reason of that is because more ice together keeps ice cold. If there's less ice and it's all by itself, it's not as cold as if it were together. So it's going to melt faster. Now, when we do a cocktail, we usually like to do a garnish, right? You can do any kind of garnish with this banana peel old fashioned. I'm going to use a lemon peel. That's what I have. I have lemons. And you're going to need a peeler, but of course, you can always use a knife as well. A peeler is much more helpful. It's always nice to peel in the direction of the cocktail because as you peel, the oils will be spitting out and you want the oils to spit out onto the glass because we don't just taste with our palate, we taste with our nose, right? So the aroma is going to be all over there and we taste first with our eyes. So we want to make sure that the garnish looks nice. And when we make a peel, you want to make a very, very long peel, right? A lot of people make this mistake, but the longer, maybe not the longer the better, but you want it long, right? About that long. That's great. Because no one wants like a little bit of a peel in a glass, especially for an old fashioned. Maybe in some cases, yes. So what I did was I point the peel towards the glass, I pinch it so that the oils go in more to the glass, and then I twist the peel, right, to make sure that the oils are going all around. And then maybe I'll even put a little bit of the oil around the glass, like just like that. So that when the sipper goes onto the lips of the glass, they get the lemon. And then when they taste the drink, they get the whiskey, they get the banana, and ooh, they get also that walnut in the very background. So you're building layers and complex flavors into the glass. The last thing that you can do is that you can put the peel in. It looks nice. But what we can also do is that we can make the garnish look nice. We can shape it. So what we normally do is take a knife and we cut the ends off, right? So we cut it basically, we get rid of the rough edges. So now it's straight. And then maybe we'll do 2 diagonal cuts right there. So now I have more of a nice manicured peel, right? And so I'll put that manicured peel into the glass with the peel facing towards the guests. And that's it. That's the banana peel old fashioned. I wish you guys could taste it, but you can make it at home as you see. It's very, very easy. So this would be more for, we like to call it like an old man drink, like for someone who likes their whiskey and on the rocks. And you can make it with whiskey, you can make it with rum. It's very easy, but of course, the star of the show is the banana. And what you really get is you get the banana flavor that's marrying really well with the oaky notes of the whiskey or the rum. I'm going to show you another quick drink if we have time. I think we do, right? Yes, we have time. And this will be more of a drink that a whole range of people would enjoy. I think everyone enjoys a sour, right? A sour drink is basically a shaken drink with citrus. So when we spoke about the flavors of sweet, bitter, and sour, the old fashioned had the bitter and the sweet in it. This time we're replacing the bitter with the sour. So we have the sweet, which of course is still the star of the show, the banana peel syrup. This time I'm going to use the one with a little bit of vitamin C in it because I want this cocktail to taste fresh. That's the sweet part. And then we have the sour, which is the lemon, because lemon juice is very, very sour. And this is the more approachable drink for a whole range of guests because everyone loves a sour. Sour cocktails, you know many of them. It's just maybe you didn't know they were in this category called the sours. But a sour can be, for example, a margarita is kind of a sour, a sidecar, a whiskey sour, a daiquiri. So that's a sour. And it's basically just a spirit with the sugar and acid. And what we're going to do is we're going to do the same kind of thing. And this, I'm always using whiskey because it's here in front of me. But you can use tequila, you can use gin, you can use any kind of spirit that you want. This cocktail will taste good with either one. It'll mostly taste good with whiskey in this case. But typically, when you use whiskey, it's good to use lemons. When you use tequila, it's good to use limes. When you use rum, it's good to use limes also. And when you use vodka, lemons. Those are general rules of thumb, but there's exceptions. And then just to take it to another step of sustainability, what I like to use is something that it might sound strange, but it's a little bit of chickpea water. Okay. So sours typically, like anyone who's had a whiskey sour has egg white in it sometimes, and that's to give it a frothy texture. But instead of using egg whites, because a lot of bars, what they do is they crack the eggs, they use the egg white, and then they throw out the yellow. That leads to a lot of waste. Instead, using chickpea water, so the water in the chickpea cans, it'll do the same effect as the egg white. It'll give it a nice frothy texture without actually giving a chickpea flavor to the drink at all, which most people don't believe until they taste it. So what you can do is that you have the water for your cocktails, and then you use chickpeas to make hummus or whatever. You eat them, right? So let's make this cocktail. This is going to be a sour cocktail, sour style. So it's going to be a shaken cocktail. So I like to serve it up in a glass. This is a really nice martini glass, but you can use any glass. It could be served even like the other cocktail on ice or without ice. In this case, we're going to do it without ice. And since it's a shaken cocktail, what you're going to need is a shaker, or as I said, you just need a jar, but a shaker would do better. I'm using a three-piece shaker. A three-piece shaker is exactly what you see it as. One, two, three pieces. The three-piece shaker has the part where you put all the contents of the liquid in. And then it has the top part where you have a filter already to strain. And then it has the cap so that when you're shaking, it's not coming out. The liquid's not coming out of the holes. This is a tiny one. This is good for making one cocktail at a time. If you're at home, it's better to have a bigger one, or it's better to have what's called Boston shakers. If you just type in online on Amazon, Boston shakers, that's basically a two-piece shaker. And that's what most bars use. You'll see most bars in America use two shakers. It does not have a built-in strainer. You basically have to use the Hawthorne strainer and put it on top of the shaker to pour. So for this cocktail, I'm going to go with the banana peel syrup again. This time I'm using the one that is got a little bit of vitamin C in it. So it's fresh because I want this cocktail to be fresh and I don't want it to have that banana bready kind of flavor. And we're doing 3/4 of an ounce. There, I poured too much. If that's okay, I'll just pour back a little bit in. Happens even in the workplace. 3/4 of an ounce. It's all about balance. Your lemon juice that you juice, I already juiced it. it could taste different, the one that I make from the one that you make, because maybe you're using different kinds of lemons. Maybe they're from a different part of the world. Maybe they're out of season or in season. So always as before, you add maybe an equal amount of the banana peel syrup to the lemon juice and you taste it before you continue on further. If it's too sweet, you can go on and add a little bit more, but you always need to taste. I'm going to add the whiskey. So I added equal parts of lemon juice and the banana peel syrup. I'm going to add a little bit less, almost the same amount as the old fashioned, but a little bit less. Technically, usually sours, shaken cocktails, they don't have as much booze as the stirred ones, which is good to know so that you know how to maybe plan your day and not, order the wrong cocktail and get, buzzed. Then we have the aquafaba. This is the chickpea water, right? So the chickpea water, I just cracked it open a little bit and I just poured out the water, right? It seems gross. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to. You can use egg whites. But then to be sustainable, it's good to use the egg yolks for something. Some bar programs, they use the egg yolks for zabaione. Or if you're a Roman restaurant, use it for carbonara. So a little bit of the aquafaba. And just to kind of demystify this idea of using chickpea water, this is what they use a lot in vegan pastry chefs use a lot of chickpea water because it does the same thing as egg whites. So to make like a meringue, for example, of egg white and sugar and froth it up, if they wanted to make a vegan meringue, they would use chickpea water and it comes out just as good, sometimes even better, because the chickpea water has a lot of protein, just like the egg white, and that's what's making it froth up. So when you're making a sour with egg white or aquafaba, which is the chickpea water, the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you froth it up, that you shake everything without ice, actually. You want to make sure that everything connects together and that you froth up the aquafaba. You want to activate it kind of. It's very easy. It's what we call a dry shake as opposed to a wet shake. A dry shake means no ice. A wet shake means with ice. So first, we just do a dry shake. I'm going to shake it. This is not how I usually shake behind the bar, but since it's a tiny little container, and as you can see in there, it's a little foamy because of the egg white, the aquafaba, sorry, the chickpea water. So I got a little bit of foam, and that's going to be really nice when a guest has a foamy drink that's like sweet and sour and acid, but it has a little bit of texture, so it's not thin. And now I'm just going to add my ice. And side note, if you're going to make cocktails at home, these silicone molds are very, very good at at making ice, as opposed to the hard, rigid plastic ones, because it just gives you a less cloudy product. And usually the cloudy ice breaks really easy, and it can over dilute your cocktail very quickly. So now we just shake with the ice. You want to shake really hard for a good amount of time. It's okay to overshake. Um, you definitely don't want to shake for a very little time, especially when you're making sours, like a whiskey sour in this case. Now, I can pour the contents into the glass. It's ready to go. But from this shaking, I've broken the ice a lot. And what's that causes? It's caused ice chips to form. So little pieces of ice that if they were to go in the drink, they would continue to water down the drink. And also when you taste them, it's kind of a little annoying to get a little ice chips in your drink for some cocktails. So instead, I'll use is a fine strainer, right? It has a little bit of banana peel in it, but it's fine. A fine strainer, this is going to catch all the little ice chips. And as you can see, it's very milky looking, frothy, because that's from the aquafaba, the chickpea water. Right? So now it's created actually a very nice foam on the top, you can see, right? And as it settles, the foam will become more distinct and the liquid will be more on the bottom. But now you have a really nice head, right? So the aquafabas bind the lemon juice and the banana and the whiskey, and it's kept it all together, and it's given this cocktail a creamy consistency. Not creamy like tastes, but creamy is in terms of texture. And texture is really, really important in drinks. Um, if you want to go a level up, what you could do is I'm going to do the same thing as I did before. Peel my citrus, always pointing towards the glass so that I get the oils shooting onto the glass. So you can see now the foam's settled on the top and the rest is on the bottom. You might get some bubbles on top. So by expressing the oils of the peel, you'll break the bubbles and make it cleaner, like a clean slate on top. And you'll also add aroma so that when the guest goes, they don't get no flavor. They get lemon and then they taste it. And then they get the whiskey and then they get the lemon and the banana. What you can also do is get just like I got the Angostura bitters, put it in a little bottle, a little dropper, just to add a little nice decoration to your cocktail. Maybe I can show this in a better way. And you'll just drop little drops of the bitters on top. I like to do 4 drops, right? So you have this kind of a situation, right? 4 drops. But then to take it to a nice decorative level, what you would take is a toothpick or a pick, and you'll just strike through them like that. So now you have basically these little cute little hearts that are on top of your drink. So the guest or your friend or whoever you're making this drink for has the hearts, then they go and they smell the lemon and then they sip and they have the texture and then they get something new. They don't get just a whiskey sour, but they get a whiskey sour with the flavor of banana. And then you can shock them and say, I did that with the peels of the banana. So cheers. Good. But I'm gonna put it away. It could be dangerous. Um, and that's it. I hope that I gave you guys a little bit of tips, not just of the banana peels thing, but also how to make cocktails. Um, very easy to make at home. Want to show you one last thing. This is the banana peel that we started with, right? The first one that I showed you when we made it, so the newest one. And as you can see, the volume of the banana peel is actually shrunk, right? Because the sugar is eating away at it, it's macerating it. And you can see a syrup is kind of forming. It's still early in the process, still needs a couple hours, but already you get a little bit of juice, right? Eventually to the point where it'll turn into this overnight, right? That's it. I hope you guys enjoyed
That was
this little
amazing. Thank you so much,
cocktail
Renato.
demonstration.
That
Thank you. If you have
your
any
last,
questions, please.
yeah, your last drink looks so delicious. I wish I was
Oh,
there to taste it.
yeah,
We've now come
there
to
it
the
is.
question and answer period of tonight's program. If anyone has a question, please feel free to unmute and take your camera off of, we can see you. I had a question. You mentioned earlier about using a peach pit in
Yeah.
drinks. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? My interest is so piqued. I
Yeah,
know more.
peach pits are a bit difficult to use. It's the stone part of the stone fruit, right? It's what bartenders and chefs would refer to as the bones, right? So what do you do with bones, right? Think of like a chef, right? What do they do with chicken bones or beef bones? You can't eat it, right? But you can boil it maybe and extract all the flavors. So from a bone, you can extract like the collagen and the marrow and all the flavor that the bone has. With peach pits, you can do that too. You can boil them. But what I found is and I forget who did this, but I found this recipe on I think it was like Eater or something, or like a well-established food website and magazine. And it was of a famous chef somewhere who he would make a peach pit vinegar, and he would use that vinegar to dress his salads. So basically what he would do is he would take, and this is the best demonstration of peach pits I've ever had, is take the peach pits and let them sit in vinegar. You can let them sit in apple cider vinegar for 2 weeks. And if you taste it every day, it doesn't taste like much is going on. But after like the 10th day or the 14th day, you get this like amazing flavor of like fruit, fresh fruity, like stone fruit flavor, like a little bit like marzipan-y, like because
Delicious.
peach pits kind of have this like almonds kind of flavor to them. So you really get this whole crazy array of different flavors that you wouldn't get from other ingredients.
Yeah.
So I would recommend letting them infuse in vinegar. And you can even try it with just one peach pit. Like let it sit in vinegar, set it, forget it. It's never going to go bad. And then smell it and taste it, and I think you'll be surprised after 2 weeks at least. Otherwise, you can boil them, but letting them sit in something to infuse over time at room temperature is the best.
We have a question from the audience. Marla asks, vodka is my favorite spirit. Any other cocktails you'd recommend for the banana syrups besides the sour?
Yes. Well, okay. So with the sour, you got basically you can do like a lemon drop, right? So a lemon drop is sugar, lemon, vodka, but you can use banana peel as the sugar, banana peel syrup, lemon, vodka. Um, Other kind of vodka cocktails. I think one thing I like is I really like Moscow Mules. Um, Moscow Mule is basically vodka, lime, and ginger beer. And banana is a really it's a cocktail that it's an ingredient that works with lots of different flavors. And banana works really well with ginger as well. So you can make a Moscow Mule. So you do a glass with ice, vodka, a little bit of lime juice, and a little bit of the banana peel syrup, and then some ginger beer. Um, so you get like a little bit of like a banana ginger beer style cocktail situation. That would be a vodka drink. Otherwise, other vodka cocktails. Let me think. With a Cosmo, I wouldn't touch that one. But maybe you can even do like a mojito style drink, but with vodka. So instead of using rum, you use the banana peel, sugar, you use lime, mint, soda water, and vodka. And doing that will actually make the banana peel shine a little bit more with vodka. Because if you use a different thing like rum, it could even cover up the flavor a little bit too much because it's aged, it's oaky. So yeah, I would go with something like that. You can definitely do like more refreshing style cocktails with soda water or ginger beer.
Okay, great. That sounds really good. Do you want to use the fresh one, the one with the acid, or the one with
The fresh one,
the banana
probably.
bread? Okay.
Yeah, the fresh one. Yeah, add a little. Yeah, yeah. You can add a little bit of lemon juice or the ascorbic acid if you can find it.
Yeah.
You can buy it on Amazon, but lemon juice is fine.
Cool. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Renato, are you finding that a lot of restaurants in New York are doing these sustainable techniques, or is it just
Uh, Unfortunately, not so much. There's something. It's a little upsetting that in the U.S. they don't really. Their sustainability is not really, it's not anywhere near the focus. You see sustainability behind the bar in Europe, they're way ahead, in Australia, in Asia, and even in South America. And for some reason in the US, they just I guess we don't care as much. In all places, New York's a little bit ahead compared to maybe in LA or Chicago, but it's very much behind. The people that are pioneering are in Europe, in Asia, in Australia. The ones that are the best at it are actually in Scandinavian countries. So some famous bars are like Himkok. Himkok is a place in Stockholm. They actually they make their own vodka, rum, gin, everything in-house,
Mhm.
right? And that's sustainable in a way because what they're doing is that they're making everything in-house. So they're not relying on transportation, right? Which is part of CO2 emissions. And they're not shipping with glassware. They're reusing their own glassware. So they're not like, when you're done with a bottle of whiskey, you throw out the bottle, right? So that's a form of sustainability. There's another one in Hong Kong, they're very ahead, where they will take, for example, like if a hurricane or a cyclone passes by and destroys a bunch of trees, they'll take the trees, right, and use it to make their furniture, or to make furniture for their bar or for the spot, or you recycle these items. And they'll even do things like take avocado pits, stick them in the freezer, and then use them as like whiskey stones for their drinks. So now instead of having ice in the glass and the ice is diluting the cocktail, they'll have an avocado pit that's extremely cold, that's keeping the cocktail cold but not melting. So
Wow,
you always have, every sip is the same. So
interesting.
they're, yeah, but in the US, we're not seeing it as much anymore, as much.
So tell me about your evolution as a bartender. Did you start off thinking you were going to be a sustainable bartender, or when did this occur in your trajectory?
So I was always happy to be a bartender and really enjoyed it, but I felt like something was a little bit missing, you know, like there was a calling. I There's this really nice word in Japanese called ikigai, and ikigai means like your life's purpose, right? And ikigai means to everyone has their ikigai, everyone has their life's purpose. That's what the Japanese saying says. And the life's purpose is, it's easy to map out if it because it's a combination of your passion, your vocation, your mission, and what you're good at, your profession, right? So I thought, okay, I'm bartending is what I'm good at. It's my profession. It gets me paid. It's my passion also. I love doing it. It's a vocation, but it doesn't really have a mission, right? It doesn't have a world need or a calling. And so I thought, okay, well, if I can turn my bartending career into something that benefits someone else or something else, I can find my life's purpose, so to say, right? It could just really make me feel like a better person.
Yeah,
And so that
absolutely.
was really, so that was, said, oh, that can be my mission, is to reuse waste, but also to teach other bartenders how to use reuse waste. So the mission now has become to make every bartender a sustainable bartender, to make them just a little bit more aware, even
Right.
if it's just a little bit.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Last question for my questions. Do you have a favorite drink, or is there a favorite drink that you like to make for other people? What's your favorite?
Yeah, so I like to, honestly, I like to make easy drinks for other people. And so I mean, I like to make shaken drinks a lot too. Those are a little harder because you gotta shake, like you saw, you have to dry shake and then wet shake, and then you gotta rinse like five different tools and everything. It makes a mess. But I think the simplest drinks are really the best kinds of drinks. They're the easiest to make, but they're also the best in flavor. And it's just like with going always back to cooking. Like the best cooking is not really the three Michelin star place, you know? If you go there, you'll leave hungry usually, you know, or like so many things that you don't even understand. The best kind of cooking is like, a lasagna from a nonna or something, or, like when grandma Sandy, she'll make rice, eggs, and bacon. Just like three ingredients, very few ingredients, like put together. So my favorite cocktail is are like the old fashioned, right? So just three ingredients: sugar, bitters, and whiskey. Or the Negroni is another drink that I really like to make, which is just gin, Campari, and sweet vermouth, and stir it and strain it, because it's through that simplicity that you're always going to get a really good product. It's always going to be something that most people enjoy. It's very approachable, and yeah, and people like what they like. So I like to give them those
Yeah,
kinds of drinks,
I like
those
that
simple
philosophy.
ones.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a great philosophy.
yeah.
Any other questions from the audience? Renato, thank you so much for being here. We're so grateful
Thank
that you
you.
spent your evening with us and took the time to do this program with us. Thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you at the library soon. Hey, Mike.
Bye, Mike.
Bye now.
Bye.
Good to
Thank you
see you,
guys for having
Renato.
me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.